Welcome back to Nissa World Wake. Today I will be talking about every card on the Commander ban list and whether or not I think it will be unbanned and why. So there are many cards to go over. This is going to be a longer video that's a little bit more free-flowing. Hopefully I don't mess up too many times, but that's for us to find out. So there's lots of different ways I could go over the Commander ban list, but I decided the most intuitive way would be to go alphabetically. So without further ado, let's kick it off. So for starters, we have Ancestral Recall. This card is on the Power 9 and the reserved list. It is 1 blue for an instant, draw 3, or an opponent draws 3. It's been reworded just to say target player draws 3 cards. This card is a few $1,000s if you want to get yourself a copy. And in Commander, I think, though it's good, it's not as good as it would be in 60-card formats. My verdict on it is that I think if it were unbanned tomorrow, it would be not very disruptive at all, honestly. Most people don't play a copy, or they don't own a copy, so they can't play it. And even if someone did cast it, they're drawing 3 for 1. That's kind of just the stuff that happens in Commander these days. It'd be good in CEDH. Every blue CEDH deck would want a copy. But it wouldn't blow up the format. People wouldn't be playing around recalls and twin casting them and all sorts of crazy stuff. So, it'd see play when it could, but no one owns copies, so it wouldn't matter very much. The likelihood Wizards unbans this is 0 out of 10. It is on the reserve list and in the Power 9, and they simply will not unban it. Moving on to Balance. Balance, I chose a newer printing because it has more intuitive wording. Each player chooses a number of lands they control equal to the number of lands controlled by the player with the fewest, then sacrifices the rest. Same with hands, creatures. So if a player has 2 cards in hand, a player has 4 lands, and a player has no creatures, everyone has to sacrifice all their creatures, discard down to 2, and sack lands down to 4. This card is extremely powerful, and it is not on the reserve list or prohibitively expensive, so I think if it got unbanned, it would make waves. However, something with the bracket system and something in current EDH is that land destruction and land denial is bracketed out of the lower tiers, and it's also just generally frowned upon. So yes, players would go and play this card. It is powerful enough to see play. However, they'd play it as much as Armageddon, or as much as Flash Fires, or any other mass land destruction spell. So you'd see it popping up in games occasionally, but only on your higher power tables. And, the pregame discussions would help with balance. On a scale of 1 to 10, this one doesn't have a 0% chance that it gets unbanned. Wizards could do it. However, I don't think they will because I think it goes against what they want the format to look like. It's against the casual nature. Putting things like Farewell on the Game Changers list is a good signal that balance is going to stay banned. However, it's not absolutely 0 like some of the cards on this list. Moving forward to Biorhythm. Wait, Biorhythm? I thought that just got unbanned. Okay, yeah, no, it did. So I must have just had an outdated Commander ban list. I thought I was looking at the most recent one. This card was unbanned on February 9th. So now that I have the correct page, I'll click the list that was linked in the announcement. Oh. On the Wizards website, it still lists Biorhythm as fully banned. This irks me beyond belief. They are a multi-million-dollar company run by Hasbro, and they've had a card unbanned for multiple months at this point, and they can't bother to update their website, a string of text, and correct the legality of a card that they unbanned. If a player is looking whether or not this card is banned, they would run into the same thing as me, look at the list and go, oh wait, Biorhythm is banned. Sorry for the tangent, but this really got under my skin when I was making this video, and I'm sure this will be the only problem with the Commander ban list. Moving on to a less controversial card, Black Lotus is the signpost card in the game, 0 mana artifact, sack it to add 3 mana. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. For similar reasons as Recall, if it got unbanned, it would not be disruptive because no one has a Black Lotus. Yet again, CEDH decks would be proxying if they could, or spending $10,000 on copies in order to spike out their tournaments, but it wouldn't be completely changing the game. It would be very, very good, but no one owns copies, so it wouldn't matter. The unban likelihood is once again 0. They will not unban this card. It is too expensive. It is too old. It is too iconic. It's better to stay banned. Moving on to a fun one, we have Chaos Orb. Now, this is one of 2 cards that fit into this category. They're called Dexterity cards. Chaos Orb is a 2-mana artifact where you can pay 1 and flip it from a height of at least a foot, and whatever it lands on gets destroyed. So there's lots of complications with this card. One of them being, well, if they're going to activate this, I'm just going to move all my stuff really far away so they can't have it land on multiple things. Another one being, what is the definition of flip? Another one being is, what if you're unable to flip this card onto the table? Another one being, what if you rip this card up into a billion pieces and sprinkle it everywhere? Lots of problems with these dexterity cards, and for all of these reasons, they have been banned in everything. If this got unbanned, people would play it for the memes. I think I'd play it for the memes. I think that's pretty fun. And just 3 mana, try to kill something. Cool. It's not very good. I'm going to be honest. It wouldn't disrupt anything. However, Wizards will not unban this card for all of the reasons I've already laid out. It's a precedent they've set, and I don't see them going back on it for fun. Moving on to Channel. This is the first card I think would be generally pretty disruptive. So for 2 green at sorcery speed, you get an effect where you can pay life to be colorless mana. So until end of turn, you may add a colorless mana to your mana pool at the cost of 1 life per mana. So if you cast this on turn 2, you can then pay 11 life and put out a Blightsteel Colossus, for example. In Vintage, that's a good thing to do. In Commander, that isn't the best thing you're going to do. You're going to do something much more broken because you have 40 life and you have access to everything all the time. I think if this card were to get unbanned, it would be included in almost every single green deck in the format. There would be very little reason not to play this. It is just a great ritual. It isn't super expensive. There's a few printings of it. And it would be one of the better things to do in the color green, both in CEDH because it's powerful, and in more casual EDH because it's fun. It's perceived as fun. On turn 3, if I play this and I fireball someone and kill them, haha, got you with my fun channel combo. That's pretty disruptive to the format. And for this reason, I think it is very unlikely this card ever gets unbanned. However, it's not 0 because the reasons that it would not get unbanned are power level based, and power level based unbannings always there's a chance, in 50 years maybe this card is terrible and it gets unbanned. Maybe it gets power crept because of just how life works. The cards that are 0s are genuinely, for any reason, never, ever, ever, ever getting unbanned because of Wizards of the Coast's philosophy, and I don't think Channel falls into that category. However, it would be so disruptive and so powerful that I really don't see it happening. Moving to a newer ban on the list, we have Dockside Extortionist. If you've not seen this card before, congratulations, you got to avoid it. It is a 2-mana 1/2 Goblin Pirate, and when it enters, you make X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments that your opponents control. Very often, this comes in for 2 mana. It makes you at least 6 mana, if not more. If you flicker it, it continues generating advantage. Often when this card gets played, the entire game starts revolving around how many of these can you make. If you play one, then your opponent plays one. Your opponent's dockside sees all the treasures that you made. Then there's decisions, do I sacrifice my treasures so my opponent doesn't get them? It's very complicated, very difficult, and honestly grinds the game to a halt. If this were to get unbanned, I think it would be pretty disruptive. Now, the reason it isn't higher is because it is expensive and it is known about. People know Dockside Extortionist is mean and powerful, and it doesn't have the fun, cool factor that a card like Channel does, where you just shove it into your red decks because it's cool. It is strictly just super powerful, and it would really mess up the CEDH scene, but in casual play, the more casual you get, the less artifacts and enchantments are on the battlefield on average, and therefore the lower power Dockside gets. It's a weird ratio. So in the higher power games, this is better, but it's allowed because it's a higher powered game. So for that reason, I put it at pretty disruptive, but not as high as some of the other cards on this list. And as far as unban likelihood, I put it at a 2, which I think is the highest we've seen so far. I could see Wizards unbanning this because it gets kind of power crept out of the format. Also, it doesn't go against any of the main tenets of Commander like we've talked about. And it's worth money. Reprint equity is something that I'm taking into consideration with these unban likelihoods. I think Wizards could get to a point where they decide, hey, let's unban this and print it in a master set and cash in. And this would be a card they could do that with. Do I think they will? No. But could they? Yes. Moving on, we got the big baddie herself, Emrakul. Emrakul is a 15 mana, 15 legendary creature. Eldrazi. Cannot be countered. When you cast it, take an extra turn. Not even if it resolves, just on cast. Flying, protection from colored spells, Annihilator 6. And if it gets shuffled into your graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle it instead. I worded that wrong, but we all know what's up. Big baddie Emrakul. Now, the problem with this in Commander, in my opinion, is twofold. One, it is really, really good and can sit in your command zone. If you want this to be your colorless commander, if you ramp up to 15, you're going to play it, you're going to get your extra turn, and then you're going to get the attack with it. And with the attack, you're going to annihilate one of your opponents for 6, which is going to put one of your opponents out of the game without them being able to interact with it because it can't be countered, and you get the extra turns. You're always going to get that attack. So that is very disruptive, and it would be a popular commander due to how big a face it is. Now, separately, it's just good to ramp into in any deck. Any color can play this because it's colorless, and if you can make 15 mana, this is probably the best thing to cast as far as creatures go. So, I think it would be moderately disruptive. I think people would try to play it because it's fun. I think people would play it as their commander because it's fun. I think all of this is true. And all of that is reasons why I think it would be a problem. However, my overall opinion is not that this would be a problem. I think it would be disruptive, but I think it's fine in the format. It costs 15 mana. Do you know what I can do for 9 mana? Play an Entwined Tooth and Nail. Play an Expropriate. Play a Biorhythm. Play an Overloaded Cyclonic Rift. There's so many things I can do that aren't necessarily better, like apples to oranges, but they're really good in game ending that I can do for half of the mana. So if you're getting to 15, you deserve a payoff. And in recent times, Wizards, unbans, and bans have talked a lot about how big mana spells should be impactful. This is the biggest mana spell there is, and it has the biggest impact you can have. And I think that's fine. I think it is likely that this card comes off of the ban list sometime in the next 5 years. It could get banned as commander. That is something I am thinking may happen to the legendary creatures on this list. This card is iconic, people like it, and I just think it is a fine suitor to get unbanned. Moving on, we have an original Kamigawa block flip card. So how this card works is for 2 mana, it comes in oriented the way that it is currently on the screen. It is a 1/1 with flying. You only look at the top part of the card. So it's a 1/1 with flying, and whenever you cast your 4th spell in a turn, you flip it around. And when you flip it around, I'm craning my head here, it says counter the first spell played by each opponent each turn. So the problem with this creature is that it's a legendary creature. If this was not a legendary creature, it would not be on the ban list. Just plain and simple. However, you can play this out on turn 1. You know, if you go land, Soul Ring, Lotus Petal, play this, play a Mox or something. It isn't the 4th spell after you cast this or anything. It's the 4th spell. So if you find a way to flip this on turn 1, you essentially win the game, and if you don't win the game, you're just being mean. You're just countering everything. It's not fun. It's not friendly. And all decks built around it as a commander operate in that way because that's the only way you can attempt to build a deck with this at the helm. But people know it's not fun, and if it got unbanned, people would build it. But the ways in which it's not fun are when it's in the command zone. So the real rule zero conversation gets to come out, and you get to go, hey, you're playing Arayo. I would not like to play against you. Please take out a different deck and play me, or I will go home. It's pretty easy to avoid. If it's in the 99 and it happens, okay, like you drew the one of, and you did a little storm turn. That's probably happening mid to late game anyway. It's fine. In the command zone, it's workaroundable. So the unban likelihood, I gave it a 2. And the 2 is pretty much they decide that banned as commander is something that they want to do. And they decide this falls into that category. I think both of those would have to be true. I think the odds that they decide banned as commander happens is probably a 4 out of 10. And then the odds that they decide this is fine is probably 50-50. So that's how I got my 2 out of 10. So that is Arayo. Moving forward, we have our other dexterity card, Falling Star. Falling Star is a 3-mana red sorcery that pretty much does the same thing as Chaos Orb, where you gotta flip it, but this time instead of destroying whatever it hits, it does 3 damage to each creature it hits. So this actually has less than 0 impact. Chaos Orb had 0. This is less because it could only go in red decks, and it deals 3 damage to a creature. Okay. But they won't unban it for dexterity reasons we've already talked about. No reason to keep talking about that. We can move on. Ooh, big one here. If you like exploration, you will love Fast Bond. So Fast Bond is an enchantment for 1 green, and it says you may put as many lands into play you want each turn. However, Fast Bond deals 1 damage to you for each land you play beyond the first each turn. So, exploration, eat your heart out. You can play 15 lands in 1 turn at the cost of 14 life with Fast Bond. Pair it up with Crucible, pair it up with Ice Till Explorer, pair it up with what you want. You're going to be able to play 10 lands explosively and at the cost of 9 life, which is nothing, or it's not nothing, but it is severely mitigated by the 40 life nature of Commander. So what does this mean? This means it would be insanely disruptive. Again, it falls into the category of channel, where it doesn't go against a player's mindset on what is unfun or what is broken. People will self-police themselves and not put balance into their decks, or not put, other cards into their decks, because they know that they're unfun. They know that they're too good. Fast Bond is just exploration but better. It's just burgeoning but a little better, So I might as well slot it in. It's 1 green and I have a copy. Might as well just toss it in. And games where it's in, it's super powerful. And you get this in a Crucible and you win the game. Or, like I've already just talked about all the combos. Your land commanders, there's so many different commanders that revolve around landfall, revolve around playing lands from the graveyard. You slot Fast Bond into those decks, and those decks go from 10 to 20. It is crazy. And, again, players will just want to put this in their deck. I want to put it in my green deck right now. I'm itching, but I can't because it's banned, so I won't. And that's just kind of how this goes. So the unban likelihood, put it way down there. It's not 0 because it's not, I don't think it's on the reserved list. It might be, honestly. I should have done better research. If you know, let me know in the comments. But they could unban it, but, a lot would have to change for them to do so. It's not against the Commander philosophy. You're not making the game unfun. You're not destroying your opponent's things. It's just too good. So for that reason, I give it an 8 of disruptiveness and a 1 of unban likelihood. Moving on, we have Flash. And Flash is a very interesting one. So The lore goes that the CEDH community gathered and they said, please, Commander Ban Committee, please, just this one time, we need you to ban something for us. I know CEDH, we just go off the EDH rules, but we have a card that we need banned so very badly. It's called Flash. It's an instant for 1 in a blue, where you get to put a creature from your hand into play, and if you don't pay its mana cost, you have to sacrifice it. In CEDH, you can flash out a card called Protein Hulk, and when you do that, you win on the spot. And it is too good for our format. A single card for 2 mana that wins you the game on the spot is too good. And the Commander Banlist gathered, and they thought, and they showed grace upon the CEDH community, and they said, okay, you get one. It's like the Spider-Man meme. Everybody gets one. And this was CEDH's one. So, Flash has been banned for this reason. If it gets unbanned, CEDH dies. I don't know this for certain. I just know it for certain. Because for them to come together and convince the Commander Banlist Committee to ban it as their one time means that it was such a problem that one of them was humble enough to ask and the other one was gracious enough to grant. It is so disruptive. It breaks the format when you're playing at the highest power. For this reason, it is not likely to get unbanned. It doesn't go against the format. All the things I've said about my other cards that have a 1 out of 10 unban likelihood, this falls into. But it would break one of the ways to play Commander. And for that reason, I hope Wizards never unbans this. The CEDH community got their one of, and they should keep it and ride with it. Moving forward, we have Golos. I am so sad they banned Golos, just personally. I wanted to build me a Golos good stuff deck, and it turns out so did a lot of people. So Golos is a 5-mana 3/5 legendary artifact creature scout. When Golos enters the battlefield, you may search your library for any land card you wish and put that card directly onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Then you can pay 2 and a Wooburg, exile the top 3 cards of your library, and cast them for free. The problem with Golos is it's just so generically good. If you want to build a 5-color good stuff deck, no one does it better than Golos. If you want to build a 5-color spirits deck, no one does it better than Golos. If you want to build a 5-color everyone is left-handed deck, no one does it better than Golos. Golos comes out and gets you that land, so it's quote-unquote paying for half of its commander tax automatically. Then it has an ability that's just so good, you gotta use it. Just 3 free spells off the top every turn. I say free, you actually have to pay 7, but that's fine. If you just jam a whole bunch of 8 drops, if you hit one of them, you're broke even, you get a land drop, and you get something else. It's good to go. And it really homogenized 5-color decks. And it also homogenized non-5-color decks. You can play a mainly 3-color deck, have Golos as your commander, and when it searches for a land, you go get the World Tree, which fixes your mana so you can activate the ability if you want. Golos was just too popular a commander immediately upon release, and the Banlist committee felt they needed to take action. If this card were to get unbanned, it would reclaim the throne as the most popular commander in EDH. I have no doubt in my mind. I would build it personally. Thousands of other Magic the Gathering players, nationwide, worldwide, would choose to build Golos decks. And you'd see it all the time. Now, in my opinion, Golos is good and fun. There's nothing on this card that I don't like, in that I don't like out of a commander that's sitting across from me at the table. If every game I played was 3 Golos decks and my deck, I think I'd be okay with that, because every deck would still have its own strategy. I have played against Golos decks. I haven't done so in many years. However, I don't think it would be the world's worst thing if that was 1 in every 10 decks was a Golos deck. I don't think Commander would be less fun of a format. I don't think it would be less diverse of a format strategy-wise. So I'm giving it an 8 on disruptiveness because there would be a big change to the format, but I don't think it would kill the format. And as far as unban likelihood, I'm pretty sure the ban list committee would never unban this card. But they don't own the ban list anymore. Wizards does. And I think Wizards could unban this and then just ignore the diversity problem. I think there's a chance that happens, and I definitely think there's a chance that happens in 5 years when there are ubiquitous 5-color commanders that get printed between now and then, and Golos doesn't seem like as much of a problem. I think it'd be a fine and fun unban, but I do see the reasons why it's banned, and I don't think it's beyond likely to get unbanned. Moving on, we got Big Daddy Griselbrand. It's a 7/7 flying lifelink where you pay 7 life, draw 7 cards. So naturally, it costs 8 mana. So it's 8 mana in black, and it's a big old creature that lets you draw a whole bunch of cards. And if you haven't caught on yet, effects in Commander that involve paying life or losing life are better in Commander because you have more of the life. If you put this on the battlefield, you can pay 35 life and pick up 35 cards. That's pretty good. It's also a legendary creature, meaning it could be your commander. All this said, how good is 8 mana, pay a bunch of life, draw a bunch of cards? In my opinion, not that good. I have talked about how 8 mana spells and 9 mana spells should be winning you the game. Nowhere on this card does it say win the game. Actually, what it says is lose a bunch of life. If you get to the mid to late game and you're down to 20 life, as you often are in the mid to late game, Griselbrand is no better than it would be in a 60 card format. One of the arguments is that it becomes naturally the best reanimation target, and that's true. I think this and Archon of Cruelty and Atraxa and Torsten, there's the list of 10 best reanimation targets. And in Commander, this would be number 1. And it's in mono black, so it would go in pretty much all of your reanimation decks. I don't know of reanimation combo colors that don't include black, but maybe there are some. Because of this, if it were to get unbanned, due to its popularity as a character, popularity as a card, and, funness to strive for, I think it would see play in a lot of decks. It has the same problem as Fast Bond, same problem as Channel, where it's so cool that people are going to want to do it if it gets unbanned. It's not oppressing your opponents. You're going to want to get your Griselbrand into play, draw a bunch of cards, play your whole deck, do your cool thing, and that's really powerful. This to say, I don't think it's too powerful for Commander. If Expropriate was on the ban list and was on this list, I think I'd give it the same ratings as this Griselbrand here. I'm saying, hey, if you unban it, it's super powerful and people are going to play it. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it is moderately likely that this card does get unbanned in the next 5 years. And that odds even goes up by another point if Wizards does introduce the banned as commander, disclaimer. Griselbrand, I don't think, is the most powerful when it's in the command zone. It's at its most powerful in the 99 of a reanimator strategy. But if it's banned as commander, more power to it. Moving on, we got Hull Breacher. Hull Breacher is a 3-mana 3/2 Merfolk pirate with flash. If an opponent would draw a card, except the first one they draw in their draw step, instead of them drawing that card, you create a treasure token. So it's not the first card per turn. It's specifically they want the one that they draw at the start of their turn. So they can't even cycle something on an opponent's turn. It has flash, so it gets the blowout potential, but it just turns your opponent's draws into mana for yourself. That's really good. Even if you're just playing it the most fair way possible, stopping your opponents from drawing cards and generating yourself mana is really good. But that's if you're being a real good person, a real nice Samaritan. Often, when you play Hull Breacher, you also play effects that have everyone draw lots of cards. You still get to draw the cards, but they just make you treasures to cast the cards you drew, some of which may be effects that draw everyone cards again. So you make these big combo turns where your opponents discard all of their cards. You make all of the mana, you cast all of the spells, and you win. If this card were to get unbanned, it would be in every CEDH deck. It would be in a lot of casual decks, and people would build decks around playing it and making it better. It is unfun to play against because it stops your opponents from doing things, but it's also fun to play with because you're making treasure and getting to do this fun thing. And that would tempt people to put Hull Breacher into their deck, which would be more disruptive and make things even less fun for the format. All of this said, the unban likelihood would be very, very low. I don't see Wizards looking at this and going, you know what, this is now a fun thing that we want in the format. They have multiple cards on this list that are banned that play well into wheels, and this is the best one of them in my opinion, and for that reason, it just needs to stay banned, not coming off, and I don't think that Wizards will be unbanning it anytime soon. I'm going to take a pause right here because I'm catching my breath. Please like this video and subscribe. Leave a comment talking about how silly and stupid I am. But yeah, I also just really appreciate you watching. This is a long video, so thank you for watching. Cool, so I'm going to move on now. So next up we have Iona, Shield of Emeria. And this is a card that they've talked about in recent times. In their most recent ban and unban announcement, they talked that they had been looking at Iona. So Iona is a 9-mana legendary angel with flying. It's a 7/7, and it says, as when it enters, choose a color, and your opponents can't cast spells of the chosen color. Now, if everyone at the table is playing a 3-color deck, this is fine. You know, you pick a color that a couple people have, you know, maybe you pick white because it's a good removal color, something like that. And then everyone has to kind of play these politic games around your Iona. The problem is the concept of monocolored decks in Commander. And if I play this card and I name black, and there's a person playing a mono black Commander deck, they can no longer take game actions. They can attack, they can't cast spells, you know, for the rest of the game. So then the argument is, well, politics. You know, maybe the opponents will destroy Iona, and this person will get unlocked, and they get to start doing their thing again. Well, the counter to that argument is, why would anyone remove this Iona if it's completely locking one person out of the game? It is in no one's best interest to unlock them. So they're kind of forced to sit there praying for a wrath that isn't coming. And that is unfun for players playing monocolor decks. And generally speaking, monocolor decks are already at a disadvantage. Just they have less access to less cards, and therefore, you know, it's harder for them to get edges. And Iona just shuts them down even more. If it were unbanned, it would see play. I don't think people would build commander decks around it. And importantly, if it is your commander and you're playing a monocolor deck, you can go, hey, friend, I would not like to play my Gonti deck against your Iona deck because when you name black, I will lose. So let's not do that. The problem is Angel is a very popular creature type, and there are lots of Angel tribal decks out there. Sorry, Angel kindred decks out there. So it gets slotted into those. And when it did get slotted into those, it would get played, and it would name black against the Gonti player, and the Gonti player would get sad. And that would happen. Local game stores across the country, it would happen every week. So it would be pretty disruptive. This said, we're back at the things that cost 9 should do things category. Wizards has talked about in their recent announcements that they're looking at this card. They're thinking about it. And that's step 1 of getting it unbanned. They have laid out all of the reasons I just said of why they're not unbanning it. But the fact that they're looking at it leads me to believe that maybe in a year, if the community is like, please unban Iona, that they just might. So I think it's a more likely unban that comes with the disruption to the format that it comes with. Back to the list. Look at this nice list, top to bottom, pretty nice. You may notice it's in alphabetical order. You know, E, F, G, H, I, K, J. What? So Wizards does not know how the alphabet works and has alphabetized their list wrong. Also, Lutri is still on here, even though it is only banned as companion. So please update the commander ban list. Wizards, this is where people go to see their things, and it should be correct. It is not hard to do. Okay, I am going to do it actually alphabetically and go on to Jeweled Lotus. So Jeweled Lotus is a 0 mana artifact that you can sacrifice to add 3 mana of any one color, only to cast your commander. Now, this is a card that they printed directly into Commander as an homage to Black Lotus, and they thought, you know, it'll be fine. It's only to cast your commander. Well, it wasn't quite fine. It was a little too good. It, you know, sported an over $100 price tag when it was legal, and it got banned out of the format, and it was a big deal because this is a card that is only good in Commander and only playable in Commander, and it got banned out of Commander. So what does all this mean? Well, I'll start with the unban likelihood on this one. I think it is very likely. I gave it a 6, but that's very compared to these other cards. I think it is very likely that sometime in the next decade they unban this card. And the reason is money. The reason they printed it in the first place was money. They wanted to sell Commander Legends. They printed a Black Lotus into Commander Legends, and people bought it. And then someone who is not Wizards, the Commander Banlist, banned it because it was too good for the community-run format. The format is not run by the community anymore. It is run by Wizards. And Wizards printed this intentionally into the format, not caring what it did, but only caring about the money. Now, in 6 years, when Commander Legends 6 comes out, Wizards is going to go, what if we unbanned Jeweled Lotus and put it in at Mythic? That would sell so many packs and make so much money. And we're the ban list now, so we can choose to do that. I see a hard way of stopping that, and I think players would be kind of happy if that happened. People who own copies would get to play with them. People opening packs would open their Jeweled Lotus and put it in their commander deck and power up their decks and have fun. I put it at an 8 on disruptiveness because it goes in every deck and it's good in every deck. You know, you play it and it's good and it's fun. You know, it's as powerful as a Soul Ring. Maybe, kind of. I don't know. It's very good. It's very disruptive, and it's not mean. It's just powerful for you once, kind of. So it's a hard card to choose to ban, and I am pretty happy that the ban committee did so. But now that Wizards is in charge, I see a hard time having this one stick in the long term. So time will tell. But let me know in the comments what you think about Jeweled Lotus potentially getting unbanned. I think there can be a lot of discourse about this card on both sides. Moving on to Caracas. Caracas is a land, first land we've seen. It's legendary, so you can only play one at a time. Taps for a white mana. Can only put in your white decks. Then it has a second ability that says return target legendary creature to its owner's hand. Well, commander decks are built around legendary creatures, so that's a pretty good effect. This card cannot be unbanned. If they were to unban 24 of the 25 cards, I would hope this is the last one, because every single white deck has to play this because it's a land slot and it's free and optimal. And it is so good all the time, immediately, that it breaks the game and just how Commander is played. They cannot ban this, they will not unban this, and that's just Caracas. So please look at my fun graph I made. Yeah, that's Caracas. Moving on, we have Leovold. Leovold is a black, a green, and a blue for a 3/3 elf advisor. Each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn. Now, this works differently than Hullbreacher. If I cycle something on my opponent's turn, I still get that first draw. Then when it comes back to me, I get my traditional one card draw per turn. It also says whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So all of your stuff has like ward, you get to draw a card. Fine. Why is this card so problematic? In my opinion, it's so problematic because it's a legendary creature. You get to put this in your command zone. And you have this really strong Wheels commander where you're going to play it, you're going to turbo it out, and then you're going to cast a wheel and win the game. If that weren't the case, it would be a 3-color sorcery speed worse Hull Breacher. There's a lot of dials on this card that make it less oppressive than Hull Breacher. It not having flash being a big one. It being 3 colors and therefore, only playable in like a 9th of the decks that Hull Breacher would be playable in, like, is a huge deal. And then it doesn't make you treasures. So it doesn't have that allure of, I'm going to combo off and make 20 treasures and do all this great stuff. It just stops your opponent. So it's only unfun, kind of. The bottom text is good, but not good enough to be the driving factor to put this card in your deck. All of this said, it is pretty disruptive. When it's on the battlefield, it's doing very good things. If it's in the command zone and you're playing it out and playing a Wheels deck, you're a jerk, quote unquote. You can rule 0, not play against it. That's fine. But people will put it in their Sultai decks, no doubt. But I think this is a potential unban. Personally, I would unban this card. I'd unban it, and I'd ban it as commander. In the 99, this card is not too good. You have Notion Thief. Notion Thief costs 4. It's not green, but it is blue and black. And it has flash, and it has, the same text on it, I'm pretty sure. It might even let you draw cards. I don't know. I'm not a Notion Thief expert. But there are effects like this legal in the format. What makes Leovold too good is that it is a legendary creature, but if it gets banned as a commander, it's not too good. So if I was the sole runner of the ban list, I would ban this as commander. Easy peasy. You could say that's hard for community to keep up with, mentally. But Wizards currently has incorrect cards on the ban list, so that's much harder to keep up with mentally. So, you pick. Moving forward, we have Library of Alexandria. It is a land. You can tap it to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Okay. Or you can tap it to draw a card from your library. But you can only do the second one if you already have exactly 7 cards in your hand. This card was only ever printed in Arabian Nights. It is on the reserved list, and it is a couple $1,000s. If this got unbanned, no one would play it because no one has it, but even if everyone had it, very few people would play it because it's not that good in Commander. You're not often sitting there fully handed. You're playing your Soul Ring into your Mana Dork into your stuff. You're not sitting at 7 cards all the time, and games are too fast to sit around dirtling, drawing 1 card at this cost. But it also is multiple thousands of dollars, and you just would not see it. However, it was only printed in Arabian Nights. It's expensive. It's on the reserve list. Wizards will not unban this card. There's no money to be made off it. Moving forward, we have Limited Resources. Limited Resources is an enchantment that costs 1 white. And it says when it comes into play, each player chooses 5 lands they control and sacrifices the rest. Okay, if you have 7 lands, you're down to 5. If you have 100 lands, you're down to 5. If you're at 3, you get to keep them all. Okay, so it's some mass land destruction. Fine. It doesn't, get all the lands. Then, second effect, as long as there are 10 or more lands in play total, players cannot play lands. So, if your turn 1 is play this card, everyone gets a land. Your turn 2 is play second land, everyone gets a land. Your turn 3 is play a third land. The person to your right plays an extra land. That's land number 10. You're at 3. The person to your right is at 3, and everyone else is at 2 until this enchantment gets removed. It's not very fun. It is mana denial for very cheap. It locks up the game in weird ways. It's just a strange card that doesn't really vibe with the 4-player nature of Commander. This 10 land count is intuitive for a 2-player game. Each player chooses 5 lands, they keep them, and then if there's 10 on the battlefield, they stay. In theory, that's 5 each. In a 4-player game, it doesn't work like that. If this got unbanned, people would put it in their decks, but because it's land destruction, it is, auto-barred to be bracket 3 or higher. CEDH decks could play it, really stacksy decks could play it, but you're a stacksy deck, and you know that, and hopefully the pregame conversations keep it from being too bad. However, games in which this is in play would be polarized because of this card. I think this is the least likely unban of cards that I think they could unban, if that makes sense. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule saying they cannot and will not ever unban this card. However, I do not think they will unban this card. It goes against the 4-player nature of the game, and it's unfun in every way. So, moving forward, we have another recent banning. We have Mana Crypt. Mana Crypt is a 0-mana artifact with an ability, tap it to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. So, like Soul Ring, but costs 0 instead of 1. Well, Soul Ring's legal, so, it's a little better, but, whatever. And there's a downside. At the beginning of your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose, it deals 3 damage to you. Full disclosure, I had this card in a couple decks when it got banned. It was kind of a blindside. Lost a couple $100, when it got banned, just because of how it goes. But I'm happy they did it. I think Soul Ring should be banned. It's ubiquitous and it's really good and it changes games and this and that. It's just so powerful. Mana Crypt is so powerful. And if it got unbanned, it would go back in all those decks, But also, people would be very upset because they sold their copies or they burned them out of protest or whatever. It'd be very interesting to see this card unbanned. But if they did, it would be very disruptive. It'd go back in all the decks. It'd be very strong in all the decks. Every CEDH deck would play one. Every bracket 3 or higher deck should be playing one. And it would just change a lot of games. Now, will they unban this card? I think no, because of the backlash. With Jeweled Lotus, unbanning it would be a fun, quirky thing that could print them money. With Mana Crypt, it is not fun and quirky. We know the state of the world with Mana Crypt. We know what happened when Mana Crypt got banned. If they unbanned it, they would unban it to put it in a set and make money. It would be the most transparent thing ever done, and the players would be very upset. And there's no reason for Wizards to make players that upset yet. In 6 years, if nothing's selling and they have to push something, they could flip the switch and do it. Who knows? But that's my opinion on Mana Crypt. Moving on, we have the Moxen. There's 5 of them. They cost 0 and they tap for a mana of their respective color. They're all on the reserved list and they're all very expensive. If they got unbanned, I think these would be more impactful than your average reserve list card because CEDH decks would be playing the ones they could play and, whatever that's worth. But Wizards won't unban them. They're $1,000 each. They're the Power 9. They're on the reserved list, and they're no fun. It's not they're no fun. They're nothing. They're just really powerful artifacts that are lands. They don't add anything, and they're thousands of dollars, and no one has them. Might as well leave them banned. Fine. Moving on, we have Nadu. This card is printed for Commander, so I'm sure it's good in Commander, right? It's a 3-mana 3/4 in Simic for a bird wizard with flying. And it says creatures you control have. So each one of your creatures now has this text box on it. Whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it onto the battlefield. It does not say tapped, so the land will enter however it would enter. Otherwise, put it into your hand. But don't worry, this ability triggers only twice each turn. The problem is, it triggers twice each turn per creature, because each creature has a copy of this ability. So, it's legendary, it goes in your command zone, and there's a couple really popular cards, like Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, there's one called like Shito or something. There's these 0-mana equipments, or 0 or 1 mana equip cost equipments that you can put in and move the equipments all over the place and get a billion triggers. And every time you do that, you're putting more lands into play untapped, and you're drawing more cards, so then you're doing more things. And oh, I drew an Elvish Mystic that I can play off the land that I hit, so now I get 2 more triggers. And oh, I drew another creature I can put in play, I get 2 more triggers. And it leads to these non-deterministic combos, and it does it really early. It's a 3-drop in your command zone, and you can play Swiftfoot Boots on 2. You can go turn 1 Elf, turn 2 Boots, turn 3 Nadu, 4 triggers. And those 4 triggers cascade and grow up, and turns take 20 minutes, and it's very powerful, and it's tempting and fun to build. I have a Simic deck, and I might just put this in the 99 because it's fun, and oh, well, I happened to have this out at the same time as a Swiftfoot Boots. I might as well do this crazy combo turn. So if it got unbanned, it would go in every Simic deck. Decks would be built around it. It would be a CEDH deck, I'm sure. I don't know the format, but I am positive it would be a CEDH deck. And it's these long, non-deterministic turns way too early. And it was a pretty recent banning, and I don't see Wizards going back on this. I think they see its power. Even if it's banned as Commander, it is too good in the 99 for all the reasons I just said. Next up, we have one that I'm really personally sad about. It's Paradox Engine. It's a 5-mana artifact, and it says whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents you control. So, backstory on me, the reason I'm personally sad about this is because when Kaladesh and Aether Revolt came out, I was but a young lad, saving my birthday money to buy packs. And I bought a pack of Aether Drift, and I opened my only ever masterpiece, and it's a masterpiece Paradox Engine, and I was so happy. I was so happy that I built a deck around Paradox Engine. I was like, I have this cool version of it, like I'm going to build a whole deck around it, and it's going to be cool. And then they banned Paradox Engine, which just swept the deck out, and made my $200 card worth $50 or whatever. So it made me very sad as a young child. Not young child, but you get the drift. You get the gist. Man, I'm talking too long. Okay. The problem with this card is similar to Nadu, where you end up taking these 20-minute non-deterministic combo turns. You play this, you play a Soul Ring, you untap your stuff, you tap all your stuff, you have dice controlling how much mana you have, you play a Preordain, you untap all your stuff, maybe you hit what you needed off the Preordain, you're floating all this mana, you're just tapping, you're taking these super long turns that probably end in you winning, but don't definitely end in your winning, so you have to keep taking them. So if it became unbanned, it would reactivate all these decks that were built around it. I was not the only person that built decks around it. Lots of people did. It was very powerful and just led to these big combo turns. It being an artifact, it being colorless, you can put it in so many things, do so many broken things with it. You can do it with elves, you can do it with artifacts, you can do it with, I guess not enchantments because those don't tap for mana, but you can just do so many things with it, and it does become ubiquitous, and it makes me sad to say that I find it unlikely that this card gets unbanned. I wish it would, but it won't. So, rest in peace, Paradox Engine. Moving on to a currently hot card to talk about, Primeval Titan. Primeval Titan is a 6-mana 6/6 with trample. And when it enters or attacks, you search your library for 2 lands, don't have to be basic, and put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So it can get your Field of the Dead, it can get your Bounce Land, it can get your Maze of Ith, it can get your Gaia's Cradle, it can get all sorts of really good lands. And it does it when it enters and when it attacks. So the reason this is stated to be banned, and the reason this card has continued to be banned, is because it is claimed that when this card is on the battlefield, the game revolves around it. The game becomes, can I clone the Primeval Titan? Can I gain control of it and attack with it for a turn? Can I kill it and reanimate it under my control? Everyone wants a Primeval Titan because it does so many good things. So, what do you do about that? That is the argument that's out there. I think that is a silly argument. If I play a Blightsteel Colossus, the game will quickly revolve around that Blightsteel Colossus. Players will be thinking, I hope he doesn't attack me. Should I kill it? Should I not kill it? Maybe I should gain control of that. Ooh, maybe I should make a copy of that. Any good creature is going to have all of those things going on with it. So I don't see why games revolve so heavily around this card compared to others. Now, this card compared to others, every green deck is going to want it. It is a ramp spell that's really good. You know, Hour of Promise gets you 2 of any lands, and it costs 5. And it's not a creature, and it doesn't give you attack triggers, and all sorts of stuff. So, like, every green deck is going to want it. And for that reason, I think it'd be very disruptive. I'd buy 3 copies and put it into all 3 of my green decks. You know, you'd see it all the time. But it would just be doing green land things, you know. It'd go get your Field of the Deads. It'd go get your Maze of Iths. You know, it would do that. How bad is that? You know, it'd be all over the place, but would it be bad? I don't think so. And I think Wizards is going to come around to that. I think the community talks about it often enough that they're thinking about it. And I think in 5 years, they will have thought about it. I think in 5 years, there might be a Primeval Titan-ish card that gets printed that's almost as good or better or something. And it makes this card not look as scary anymore, and Wizards unbans it. I don't think it's happening in the next 2 years, but I'd be surprised if it didn't happen in the next 10 years, honestly. Moving on, we got Prophet at Crucifix. This card also makes me sad. My first deck I ever made in Commander was a Simic deck, and I had no budget, and I just pulled together cards that I already owned, and I tossed this in, and I was playing, and I played this card, and they said, oh, what are you doing? Like, that card's banned. And I'm like, what do you mean this card's banned? You have a Mana Crypt in play, and this guy over here is playing Stasis, and I play this 5 mana rare from Theros, and it's banned? What? So, it made me sad. But it's a 2/3 for 5 in Simic, and it says untap all creatures and lands you control during each other player's untap step. Okay, so a Seedborn Muse. What's wrong with that? It has a second line of text that says you may cast creature cards as though they had flash. So it lets you take 4 turns per turn if you're only casting creatures, which is pretty good. It lets you do a whole bunch of stuff. It's a 1-card engine. It has the same problem as Paradox Engine and Nadu in that it allows you to take 10 minutes of game actions for every 2 minutes of game actions your opponents take. You're taking 4 turns, they're taking 1. You're controlling the flow of the game, and that is not fun for your opponents. And for this reason, I think it's going to remain banned forever, just due to the 4-player nature of the game, due to time. You know, everyone's time is valuable. You shouldn't be taking all of the game actions. And it would be, I think, even more disruptive than Primeval Titan. Every single Simic deck would put this in. This card is dirt cheap. Every deck would put it in because it's fun and it lets you personally take a lot of game actions and draw cards and play things, which is what you personally want to do in a Commander game. And it would hurt your opponents in ways that you weren't intending. So I think this one's staying banned. Was still crazy to me when I first learned about it, but now it makes sense. Now it's time for my hot take. Recurring Nightmare is a 3-mana enchantment that says it has an activated ability of paying the cost of sacrificing a creature and returning it to its hand to put target creature card from your graveyard into play, and you may activate that only as a sorcery. So you're victimizing a creature, but victimize gets 2 creatures out of your graveyard, and this one only gets 1. But it's you can do it again and again and again. For 3 mana each time, you can swap a creature in play for a creature in your graveyard. Is that good? So one of the arguments is that this card is hard to stop. It's hard to remove. Because of how it works, you cast it for 3, and before any of your opponents get priority, you sack a creature and return it. to do the reanimation, so they actually never have an opportunity to cast a disenchant on it. Well, they also never have an opportunity to cast a disenchant on my reanimate. That card can only be stopped by a counterspell. This can also be stopped by a counterspell. You know, like, there are lots of cards that can't be interacted with other than the stack. This is one of them. And it's 3 mana reanimate again and again and again. Okay, you know, how many turns in a row is that super good? I don't know, a few. In my opinion, if this card gets unbanned, it's might be your best card in your reanimation decks. It's not the best card heads and shoulders above all the other ones. You know, if you're trying to reanimate huge creatures, you got to have a creature in play to sack. You always have your commander, but, you know, you got to get it. It's in the 99. You got to find it. You got to play it. I don't know. I think it's fine. If I controlled the commander ban list, this would already have been unbanned. One of the other big knocks against it, though, is that it's on the reserved list. And for this reason, I'm giving it a 1 in unban likelihood. Wizards is not going to unban this card because there's no money to be made off of this card. It is on the reserved list. It's hard to come by. And there are talks about how it's unfun and it's too good. And all of that compounded with it being on the reserved list is going to keep it banned. Which I think is a shame. But, hey, that's why I'm not in charge. Next up, we have Raphelos, the best mana dork ever. Raphelos is 2 green for a 2/1 elf legend. And it has an ability, you may tap it to add 1 green mana to your mana pool for each forest you control. Importantly, it is legendary. So, you get to put this in your command zone, and on turn 2, you will have 2 forests in play, because you're a mono green deck that has a reason to play all forests. Then, on turn 3, you will have 3 forests in play, and you will tap it, and tap your 3 forests, and have a 6-drop on turn 3 every single game. And that's too good. Additionally, this card's on the reserved list. So everything I just said results in this card being pretty disruptive. There would be commander decks built around it. There would be green decks would put this in the 99, but it's on the reserved list, so it can't come up all the time everywhere. It's also better in monocolor decks, which is interesting. If you're playing a 5-color deck, this card is actually bad. If you're playing a 2-color deck, probably it's fine. If you're playing a mono green deck, it's insane. And again, if it's your commander, it is letting you cast 6 drops for 2 every game, or on turn 3 every single game. That's pretty disruptive and pretty good. So when you ran into it, you would notice. But it's too powerful. It's a legendary creature that is even too good if you banned it as commander, and it's on the reserved list. All these reasons, it's not getting unbanned ever. Sorry, Raphelos, you're just too good. Next up, we have another card that Wizards has talked about in recent banning announcements, and that is Sundering Titan. Sundering Titan is an 8-mana 7/10 artifact creature. And it says when it comes into play, choose a land of each basic land type, then destroy those lands. So let's say that all players are playing all 5 colors. You can destroy a forest, an island, a swamp, a mountain, and a plains. Or you can destroy a mountain, plain, swamp, and a tropical island. You know, you've fulfilled choosing a land of each of the types by only selecting those 2. It's also not a may, so if you're the only person at the table playing blue and the only island is your own, you have to blow it up. So that is its enter the battlefield effect. There's also an effect when it leaves play. You choose a land of each basic land type and destroy those lands. Now, very importantly, it is not when it dies. It's when it leaves play. So if you were to exile it, the trigger would still happen. If you were to, flicker it, the effect would still happen. So the talks is, this is mass land destruction at the cost of 8 mana and kind of having to build around it. And it sometimes has to hit your own, and it doesn't kill them all at once immediately. All of this put together, the question is 8 mana destroy 10 lands too good? Or is it just going to self-police itself? And this one I had a really hard time ranking. I think it is disruptive, and I think people would play it. And when people played it, I think it would be unfun. However, it's one of those 8 mana spells. You know, for 8 mana, you can do what you want. You know, if you 8 mana won the game, we'd shuffle up and play again. If you 8 mana play this and then ephemerate it, and I'm all but dead, we'll shuffle up and play again. You know, that's fine. Wizards has talked about thinking about unbanning it, and I think they will in the next decade unban this card or have a more definitive reason on why they won't. But this one I had a really hard time ranking on both. But I think it would mess up the format a little too much. Not a little too much. I think it would be disruptive. But I also think it'll probably get unbanned. Next up, we have Sundering Titan at home. Sylvan Primordial. So this is a 7 mana, 6/8 for a creature with reach. Oh, sneaky reach. When it enters, for each opponent, destroy a non-creature permanent that player controls. So it does what... Oh, I forget that card. Never mind. I'll keep moving. For each permanent destroyed this way, search your library for a forest and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So it's like Sundering Titan, because it destroys lands when it comes in. But it doesn't have to destroy lands. It can destroy artifacts or enchantments or planeswalkers. It can destroy all sorts of stuff. And it gets you forests. So, you know, it's not taking one player out of the game. It's not taking 4 of one person's lands. It's taking 1 of each. And it costs 7. You know, that's expensive. I really don't understand why this card is banned. This was also in my original Commander deck originally, you know, in the same build as Prophet of Krufix, and I didn't understand it then, and I don't understand it now why it's banned. It's 7 mana, Beast Within 3 things. You know, Beast Within is fine. You know, Generous Gift is okay. You know, Sylvan Primordial blows up 3 things. That is something you're allowed to do. It also gets 3/4. It ramps you for 3. That's also something you're allowed to do in Commander. The argument around this is very similar to the argument around Primeval Titan, in that once it's in play, the game is revolving around getting clones of this card, copying this card, flickering this card. And then once you're doing that, you know, it's too good. You know, it's ramping you too much. It's killing too much of your opponent's stuff. But the card costs 7, you know? You're winning the game at 7. 7 is fine. This coming in and killing some stuff and ramping you and then having the game revolve around it is fine, in my opinion. I would unban this tomorrow if it was up to me. I do not think that is the Banlist committee's sentiment. So, disruptiveness, I don't think it would be disruptive if it came in. I think it would see some play. It wouldn't see, you know, oogles and boogles of play, because it's not that good. It's something to do for 7 mana, you know? It's fine. But I don't think it's something that they're considering unbanning right now at all. But I hope that they will think about it more in the future, and that it will come off the ban list sometime, you know, sometime. Next up, we have Time Vault. This one gets to be a quick one. It's a 2-mana artifact that comes in tapped. It has an ability that you can tap it to take an extra turn after this one. And if you want to untap it, you can skip a turn. Fine. There's other ways to untap it. Manifold Key, Voltaic Key, Teferi, Temporal Archmage. You know, there's lots of ways to untap an artifact. And if you find a way to untap an artifact every turn, you can take all of the turns. So it's a 2-mana combo piece to win the game. It's also on the reserve list. If it got unbanned, people would put it in lots of decks, and it would win lots of games, and it would be in CEDH, and it would be super duper good. But they're not going to unban it, so it's not too important to talk about. It is just a crazy efficient 2-card combo. I'm sure there's commanders that combo with it. Not worth considering unbanning. That is what the card is and why it is banned. Next up, we have the 8th of the Power 9. One of the Power 9 is not banned for no reason. But this one, Time Walk, it is 1 in a blue, take an extra turn. There are lots of cards that say this on it, but they cost more than 1 in a blue. Those cards are good, making this card very good. If it got unbanned, CEDH would, eat it up. Every blue deck would have a copy. There'd be CEDH decks around playing it, and Snapcaster playing it again and doing all sorts of cool stuff. That's fine. It's on the reserve list, and it's a few $1,000s. No one's going to play it in your casual games. You're not going to see it unless you're proxy friendly, and it falls under all of the categories of all of your extra turn spells, where it is a bracket 4 thing to be taking multiple extra turns at once. Like, if your deck is time walk, snap, time walk, snap, time walk, you're a bracket 4, and you sat down and agreed to play that game. So I don't think it would really break the format, because you just wouldn't see it. It's the best of the Power 9, I think, in the format. The unban likelihood is 0. It's a couple $1,000s, and it's too good. Next up, we have Tinker, and this one I thought about a lot. So blue kind of gets the short end of the stick on a couple cards we're about to talk about. The first one's Tinker. So Tinker is 2 and a blue for sorcery. You sacrifice an artifact, and then you go in your deck and you get an artifact and you put it into play. So you sacrifice your Soul Ring, and you go get your Blightsteel Colossus, or your Portal to Phyrexia, or your, whatever you want it to be. You go get your huge artifact, your Bolus's Citadel. You put it in play, and it's great. So it's a tutor that also ramps you, and it's great. It's so great that it would be the best blue card in Commander, I think. Turn 1 Soul Ring, turn 2 win, would be a common play pattern across all power levels. It's not inherently unfun. It's not, a crazy card. If they unbanned it, they would reprint it, because that's a good way to get money, It would see play, and it would be the best card to cast in blue in all of Commander. Might just be the best card to cast in Commander on rate. It would warp CDH. It would be a problem. And for that reason, they're not going to unban it. I gave it a half of a point. I didn't give it a 0, for reasons that we'll talk about. I guess I'll talk about them right now. The card Natural Order exists. Natural Order is a 4-mana green card that says sacrifice a creature, get a creature. So for 1 more mana in green, you get to do this for green creatures, which isn't as good, but on the scales on the right, I would give it a 9 on disruptiveness and a 1 on unban likelihood. However, that card is currently not on the ban list, and it's almost just as good as Tinker. Similarly, we have Tolarian Academy in blue, and Tolarian Academy is a legendary land where you tap it and add a blue for each artifact you control. Green has a card called Gaia's Cradle, which is a legendary land where you tap it and add a green for each creature you control. That card is not on the ban list, but Tolarian Academy, too good for Commander. It will not get unbanned. It is on the reserve list. It is multiple thousands of dollars, and it's too good for Commander. However, I would say the same about Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle is $1,000, too good for Commander, and just ridiculously broken, and on the reserved list. If this card got unbanned, blue decks would play it, CDH decks would play it, decks would be built around it. Your expedition map, go get Tolarian Academy, make 1 billion blue mana, do some stuff, untap your lands, do stuff. Like, it would be a card. It's $1,000 and on the reserve list, though, so you wouldn't see it too much in your casual games, but people who had it would play it because it would be very good, and it would be super good in CDH and probably good enough to be a problem. So I just had a little tangent there about green getting its Tinker and Tolarian Academy, but blue not getting theirs. It doesn't make sense to me. I think Natural Order and Gaia's Cradle should both be banned, in my opinion. And I like green, but anyway. Next up, we have Trade Secrets. Trade Secrets was in the original Commander decks and was banned before the next set of Commander decks. So it is 1 and 2 blue for a sorcery that says target opponent draws 2 cards. Then you draw up to 4 cards. That opponent may repeat this process as many times as they wish. So you choose an opponent, and they will go, okay, I would like to draw 80 cards. and then you go, okay, I'll also draw 80 cards, and then you both draw 80 cards. This leads your other two players to be out of the game, and then it's a one-on-one where both of you have your entire decks in your hand, and it costs 3 mana, and that is insane. Um, if this got unbanned, it would be the best card in CDH. Um, every deck would play it, and there'd be stacks and stacks where you trade secrets with an opponent, and you both draw your whole deck, and then you try to combo off, and they're countering you, but you're countering back because you both have your entire decks in your hands, and it's just a problem. And in casual games, people would slot this in, not thinking too hard about it, and every time they cast it, their opponents would draw 80 cards, and it would be a problem. Um, they learned their lesson with this one. It is too good. They didn't think it through all the way. It was a mistake, and it's going to stay banned because it's a mistake, and they learned from it, and that's how that went. Next up, we have Upheaval. Upheaval is a 6-mana sorcery, and it says return all permanents to their owner's hand. All permanents includes lands, so it's Cyclonic Rift, but for everything and for everyone. So you're also picking up your stuff. It falls into the category of mass land destruction, because having everyone pick their lands up. But it's better than that because what you do in Upheaval decks is you generate, instead of 6 mana, you float 20 mana, you use 6 of it to cast Upheaval, and then you use the other 14 mana to play back out your mana rocks and have a board. So you get to have some stuff. Your opponents don't have anything. They have to start from 0, so they'll go, land Soul Ring because it's mid to late game, and they probably have that already. But you'll have a full board, and it'll take 3 or 4 turn cycles for you to kill everyone, but you will kill everyone. It's just too good. It'd be built around in lots of decks, I think. I don't think people would, picture it as land destruction because it's not destroying them, so they might slot it into their decks more often. I think if Wizards were to unban this, they would say, hey, this is a bracket 4 and above deck type card because it is land destruction, but you would see it in those games. So I put it as a 7 on disruptiveness, but they're not going to unban it. It's really, really, really powerful mass land destruction, and I think that's against what Wizards wants in the format. Whew, long video. I'm going to once again plug myself and say, if you've enjoyed it, even if you haven't enjoyed it, if you've hated this video, still like it because you're giving me an hour and 17 minutes of your time, and I appreciate it, and just it would mean the world to me if you to like this video. So yeah, last card, Yawgmoth's Bargain. It's a 6-mana black enchantment that says skip your draw step, pay 1 life, draw a card. Is an activated ability. So it's like Necropotence, but it costs twice as much, but you get the cards immediately instead of at the end of your turn. So a lot to unpack there. Necropotence it might be the best card in black in the format. It lets you draw a whole bunch of cards because you have a whole bunch of life. But you get them at your end step, so you only get to keep 7 of them, but that's still pretty good. And it's really good. Now, this card is twice as expensive, and it has almost the same thing, except you can do it on your opponent's end step so that you don't have to discard the hand size. You can do it, in the middle of your turn, like, I guess I'll look at 3 more cards and try to hit something. You get them right there, right then, right now, and that's really pretty good. This card is on the reserved list, so Wizards cannot make money off of reprinting it. I think they're going to keep it banned. But I don't think it would be the best card ever. Necropotence does exist. Grizzlebrand could exist in the format. These pay life for cards effects, I think, are okay. Especially because it costs 6, and it's an enchantment with 1 ability. Necropotence costs 3, and it has a similar ability, but definitely not an ability that's only half as good. It might be 80% as good. So I think Yawgmoth's Bargain, you'd see it in decks, you'd see it in CEDH. It'd be very good, but I don't think it would be unfun. I don't think it would break the format. However, it is going to stay banned because it's on the reserved list, and Wizards can't make money off of it. But I could see in 5 years if they're really, really trying to cut the commander ban list down as slim as possible, uh, they could unban it just cause. So that's the whole list. That is my opinions on every single card on the entire commander ban list. So thank you so much for watching again. I do really appreciate it. Like and subscribe. I don't know who put that there. Someone did. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you disagree with something, let me know in the comments. If you agree with everything I said, definitely let me know in the comments. And then, yeah, watch one of these videos. Bye.